Chapter 12, Key Issue 2, talks about where we are going to distribute different customer services. Um, so when we're talking about those consumer services, remember we're talking about the ones that people are going to be directly paying for, individuals. So this isn't dealing with government services or with like wholesale services. The next part of our chapter will talk about business services instead. So central place theory is going to explain why consumer services follow a regular pattern based on the size of the settlement. So larger cities have more consumer services and also more specialized one. So a smaller area, like a small town, might still have a grocery store, but it may not have many. Smaller areas will have less Whole Foods than Publix is in Florida. If you want to go to a mall, you won't have a mall in every single city. You don't have like tuxedo rental places in every single town or city. So some things have a larger range than others. Central place theory was developed by a geographer by the name of Walter Cristale, and he proposed this concept in the 1930s. And it still applies pretty well. So when we're looking at central place theory, the first thing you need to know that a central place is the market center that's used for the exchange of goods and services by people, and it attracts people from around this surrounding area. The central place is going to be centrally located. That's why it's called central place. The market area, or also called the hinterland, is the area surrounding the service from which customers are attracted. And then you also have range and threshold. So the range of a service is how far people are willing to travel to use it. So in general, things that you use every day, people drive short distances for. So it says movie rentals there, and I feel like that's definitely a sign of our times that doesn't really work anymore. But I think of like gas. Like most people, when you go to get gas in your car, either go to a gas station near your home or on your way to the highway or close to your work. You don't usually drive across town to get gas. Groceries. Most people go to the grocery store that's closest to their home. And you might have preferences. You might prefer Publix over Winn-Dixie, or you might prefer Whole Foods. You might prefer a green market. You might prefer one of the little produce markets, like Roarbeck's. But you're going to go to the closest one. Like Roarbeck's, the little produce market, has more than one location in South Florida. You're probably not going to drive to the one in North Palm Beach if you live down here. And then you also have the threshold of a service. The threshold is the minimum number of people who you need to keep that service functioning or running. So it's really just how many people do you need to keep your business going. And so you often see people like flooding a market. So like cell phone stores now, they keep opening more and more and more, even though like most people already have cell phones and cell phone service. So at this point, like opening another cell phone store 5 minutes away from the other one, like probably won't increase the overall sales for the company. It'll just start to decrease the sales for the individual stores. But if you were going to open a movie theater in Boynton, like where would you put it that doesn't already have access to a movie theater? There's one out in West Boynton already, and there's one by the mall. Are there enough people in Boynton Beach for you to open another movie theater? Probably not. So you probably would have exceeded the threshold for movie theaters. So we're going to look at this picture, which can be a bit overwhelming and sometimes hurts my eyes when I stare at it for too long. So we have 4 different sizes of marketplace areas. So we have hamlets, villages, towns, and cities. And in South Florida, you'll find villages, towns, and cities as settlements. So like Wellington is a village. Biloxo is a town. Boynton Beach is a city. So you can find all these different little classifications for where we live as well. But as far as market area goes, and I'm going to show you here, right here, this is the central place of this market, and it'll be a hamlet-sized area. It's called the central place because it's centrally located. We use hexagons because they allow everything to have a central place. So this place here is equidistant from all the sizes. But if we use circles, which would let it be equidistant as well, you'd have to overlap. If we use squares, it wouldn't be equidistant. So we use hexagons to represent the central place in a market. So this would be something like a gas station or a grocery store, something that you would need to have in small population areas because there's a limit to how far people will drive to reach these products. So here's your hamlet size one with this light blue hexagon around it. And then here you can see the range. And the range ends here at this next one. And then here's your range for this central place, right? So all of these would be things, again, like a grocery store, 7-Eleven, gas stations. Then you have your village. This is a slightly larger area. And so do you see the more grayish kind of larger hexagon here? This shows you a service area for something a little bigger. Again, here's the central place. This here represents the range. The threshold for this marketplace would be all the people who live within this area here. And you can see that it encompasses several hamlets. Maybe this is like a movie theater or a mall, right? Something where you need a little bit bigger of a location for. And then we have towns. And towns you're going to see represented by these darker lines here. And so a town is everything inside of this hexagon. So it's it overlaps with different towns or different villages and has many hamlets in it. And then you can see that the range is bigger. So this might be something like a specialty grocery store, like a Whole Foods, like a bridal shop, something that people are going to drive a little further for because they don't need it all the time. A theater to see plays in maybe, but it has a bigger range. It has a bigger range, but it also has a higher threshold. It needs more people to make it survive. So you wouldn't put a second one, like if this was a tuxedo rental shop, you wouldn't put a second one right next to it, and then a third one here, and then a fourth one here. In the real world, you might have a couple centrally located in one area, within like one mall area maybe. But if this was a Whole Foods and it needed this many people, it had this high of a threshold, you wouldn't put a second Whole Foods here. You would space it out so you had enough people. And you see that they're nesting. This is called a nesting system because there's many hamlets and many villages here. And now we're going to look at a city. So here's the central place for a city. And so a service that can be located within one city. Do you see the yellowish pale hexagon here? The city is going to encompass more than one town, more than one village, and more than one hamlet. And so a city is going to have even a higher threshold, right? It needs all of these people to make it work. And then its range is going to be the highest yet. People are going to come from even further to get to something like this. And this might be something like a large science museum, like a sports arena. So you probably wouldn't drive to Miami to go to the grocery store for like regular things, but you might drive to Miami I would drive to Miami to go to a play or like a musical or the science museum or like to see a different zoo. But more people might drive to Miami to see like a basketball game or a football game. I'm not a big sports person. But maybe that's why you're driving to Miami. I'll drive to Miami to get on a flight to somewhere that doesn't, an international flight that doesn't fly out of Fort Lauderdale, to a cruise that won't leave from, Fort Lauderdale or West Palm. So there's things that I'll drive to Miami for that I have a higher range for. And they're nerdy things, like I'll drive to Miami for the comic book convention. But many people will drive there for like basketball games, baseball games, football games. Those things all have a higher range. We aren't going to have a sports team in Miami, one in Fort Lauderdale, and one Broward. At least not a major league. So we have this hierarchy of consumer services. So consumer services that have small thresholds, short range, and small market areas are going to be found in the smaller settlements like we talked about. Larger settlements have consumer services that have larger thresholds, ranges, and market areas. And because of that nesting setup within a large settlement, you're going to have many, many grocery stores and many, many gas stations and many, many of these other marketplaces all subdivided into smaller areas. Central place theory posits that market areas across a developed country would be shaped as a series of hexagons of various sizes. Although they're not always going to be perfectly shaped that way, it's just a great way to visualize it. And we already talked about the 4 different levels of market area. So here you can see North Dakota. And in North Dakota, you can see that there's a large city, Minot, and then you have smaller towns here in the pink, villages in the orange, and then hamlets in the light brown. If you did the same thing for South Florida, you would see like the city of West Palm Beach, the city of Boynton Beach, Delray and Boca as your bigger cities, and then things like Hypoluxo as your villages, and then again, Wellington as Hypoluxo would be like a small town, and then Wellington would be like your village. So where are we going to locate different services? We need to look at our largest settlements then to kind of understand that. And so we have something called the rank size distribution of settlements in the U.S. This ranks settlements from largest to smallest. It's in most developed countries, but not all, have a regular pattern or hierarchy. So rank size rule states that the country's nth largest settlement is 1/nth the population of the largest settlement. And if you plot the populations on a logarithmic paper, it'll make a straight line. Exceptions to the rank size distribution of settlements include primate cities. A primate city is really simple. Like when you have one really large city for your country and the next city is less than half the size of that one. So like Paris is the big example in Europe. So in France, Paris is way more than twice as big as the next largest city, Marseille. So Paris has a primate city rule. So rank city rules, like let's look at Canada. So here we have Toronto with over 5 million people. Then we have Montreal with over 3 million, Vancouver with over 2, Calgary with over 1, and Ottawa with over 1 million. Let's look at how this kind of plays out with rank size rule. So according to rank size rule, the second largest city will be about half the population of the first largest city. It's never going to be perfect, right? So the first largest city is 1 million. The second largest city should be about 500,000. The third largest city should be 1/3 the size of this one, so about 300,000. The fourth largest city will be about 250,000, or 1/4 the size of this one. So the fifth largest city would be about 200,000 people, or 1/5 the size of this. The U.S. doesn't fit this rule perfectly because like our second largest city is LA, which is actually more than half the size of New York. But the idea is that you have many large cities spread out throughout a country. In primate city, you have really just one main city, one large urban area, and then many much smaller ones, which can lead to problems, especially in a developing country where people have to drive a really long way to get to services, so they don't have access to them. People won't have equal distribution of wealth. It implies that you don't have equal distribution of services. Like Bangkok is a really like a classic case example of a country having a large city. So in Thailand, Bangkok is the largest city. And people have to travel way too far to get there. There's rampant pollution, shanty towns, things like that. So in the developed world, a primate city might just be there because you have a smaller country.